Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Doge Who Reads. In today's episode of Dungeons & Dragons Horror Stories, we have a few tales. From a story of a player that is put into an uncomfortable situation, to a player that takes his character's love for nature to an extreme degree, there are lessons to be taken from all of these tales. But first, backed by popular demand, I present to you the Like and Comment Kitten. Man, he's getting big fast. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's get right into the stories. That Time When Horny People Ruined a Campaign and Ended a Friendship, by Reddit user Giano. This is my first post in the sub, so I hope that I'm doing it right. It should also be clarified that English is not my first language, so forgive me if I make any mistakes. First of all, I'm not a really experienced player. I've only played in 3 campaigns of 5e, and all of them with these people. So let's introduce you to the party. Obviously, the names I'll use are not their real names. Alex. It was my best friend at the time, and was the one that introduced me to the party. I've got to admit that I was kinda in love with him. But aside from that, he is the most perverted and horny guy I've met in my entire life. Brent, the DM. He was a chill dude, and, in my eyes, one of the best narrators I've ever met. He was friends with Alex for years. Trixie, a good friend of Alex and her ex-girlfriend, though they broke up on good terms. She is kind of a jerk though, but in character she was very polite and respectful. Beth, the usual and quiet pervy girl. She always scared me with her crazy ideas. You'll get it later. Me, your average virgin guy, especially because I have never been interested in sexual stuff, and it kinda makes me uncomfortable. Remember that for later as well. So the story begins 2 years ago, in my second campaign, though the real story begins in the third one. But this part is important too. In this campaign, we decided to make characters that were the opposite of us. So I made this lustful, interdimensional warlock woman that was exiled from her dimension for flirting with the Dark King's daughter. So my character was the one who starred in the funny scenes of the campaign, seducing everything that moved, without success obviously. The others liked my playstyle with this character, and I was having a lot of fun trying to create seductive phrases with every NPC that my character considered beautiful. Fast forward to the third campaign. In the campaign, I was allowed to create a character as I pleased, but Alex begged me to create a, quote, half-dragon Shada. So, being the dumb idiot that I was in that time, I agreed, but I kind of knew the reason why he wanted that. So the character I created was a half-dragon boy who grew up in a cathedral and became a sort of cleric mage that the party would convince to join them. Speaking of which, they are a bunch of weirdos. Alex was playing as a human paladin who conveniently served the same goddess as my character. Trixie played as a rogue half-elf, the average, mysterious-looking rogue, and the star of the creepiness. Beth's a human bard. She told us she liked the way I played the last campaign, so she wanted to play that role herself. I liked that idea, thinking that it could be a funny character such as my warlock from the last campaign. I was wrong. At first, it was funny playing like an innocent boy who don't know anything of the world, except the goodness he serves. But things were starting to get weird when Beth's bard started using her points in charisma and persuasion when she had the chance. The first thing she did when her charisma and persuasion stats were high enough was to flirt with the lovely Tavern Keep daughter, and seduce her to, quote, play with her upstairs. She did pass the persuasion check and proceeded to the act. At first I thought Brent will narrate how they'll go upstairs and then fade to black, as we always do. But for some reason, he and Beth narrate how Beth's bard had sex with the girl. I was a bit uncomfortable, but I rolled with it for the sake of my friends, because the only thing I'm scared of is losing my friends because of me. So I endured that session, hoping this is the first and last sexual intercourse of this campaign. I was wrong again. Every session concluded with the bard banging some of the NPCs of the town, and when she was bored, she decided to bang Rogue, pass the persuasion check, and they do it next to my character's tent. Now, you may know who is the next target of the horny bard. Yes, my poor half-dragon. Firstly, Beth's bard convinced my character with her high persuasion rolls to dress as a girl. This probably was suggested by Alex. I refused to let her continue, but Brent gave her the green light, and then he let them force my character to have a threesome with the rogue and himself. I won't get into the details, but that was the most uncomfortable moment I've been so far at that time. When we finished that session, I talked to Brent about lowering the sexual stuff a bit, but he refused, arguing that, quote, the majority rules. So there I was, the sheep cornered by a pack of thirsty and horny wolves. At that time, I was disgusted by my friends. Even Alex began to join the sexual part of the session, but now I think it was his plan all along. You may say, why didn't you just quit the campaign? Because I was a dumb guy that didn't want to lose his friendship with Alex, so I stayed entirely for him, but not for too long. You see, one session we were tasked to cross a tunnel, but it was in the territory of a powerful monster, which turned out to be a dragon. So my character interceded. I had told the dragon that we meant no harm and that we just needed to cross the tunnel, and that resulted in us to have two options: fight the dragon or retrieve him an object from the other corner of the realm. Thankfully, we agreed to seek for the object, but for Beth, that wasn't fun. So she decided, just as the memes, to seduce the damn dragon. And it worked. It was awful, but at least I wasn't participating. In the end, the dragon let us continue our journey through the tunnel, but a group of strong monsters caused the campaign to end in a TPK. I was relieved and decided to never play D&D with them again. I gradually lost contact with all of them, including Alex, sadly, but at least it's a funny memory now. The moral of the story is that it's good to ask all of the players if they are okay with sexual stuff in the campaign, or don't include that at all. It's uncomfortable and a bit gross. This is why Session 0 is so important. It's good for laying down ground rules and discussing what everyone involved is and isn't comfortable with. Though, even if you do decide to do a more adult-oriented campaign, that is no excuse to take away player agency like they did when they forced OP's character into the position he was put in. Though, it does suck to hear that OP lost contact with the DM and others after deciding not to play with them anymore. I feel like if OP would have brought up how uncomfortable he was with the whole ordeal, they probably would have apologized and changed things. If that would have happened, perhaps OP would still be hanging out and playing with them to this day. This is just a reminder that communication is key in any tabletop RPG. Let's move on to the next story. General Dumbass thinks he's a tactical genius and party leader, by Reddit user NoCloud7275. This is from an online game I played in a while ago now. The party was pretty nice, with everyone having interesting but relatively grounded and low-powered backstories, as we were all only level 1. Except for General Dumbass. He was some sort of retired officer from a neighboring kingdom, which had fought against the one we were currently in, had been captured and imprisoned for decades, losing his skills and rendering him frail until he was later released. He'd originally wanted to be a general, but the DM thought that was a bit much, and lowered him down to a lieutenant. Despite this, General Dumbass would insist we call him General or Sir. He said it was a joke, but would get audibly irritated when none of us did. While General Dumbass fancied himself and his character tactical masters, his would amount to little more than military jargon, or terms strung together. Like, during the middle of combat, he'd say, quote, "We need to hit their core at flank," and stuff like that. Additionally, despite being a battlemaster fighter, I can't remember a single time he used any of his maneuvers. On top of this, General Dumbass would constantly try to tell us how to play our characters in combat, or insist he was the party face when he had terrible charisma, and then would get frustrated when we didn't play like he wanted, and would complain that we weren't respecting his rank. When 1. He was a retired general and no longer held rank. 2. None of us were soldiers. 3. None of us were even from the same kingdom he was. We were tasked by some count to track down and scout out a specific bandit fortress hidden in the wilderness where an organized group of raiders led by a bandit king were hiding and harassing nearby villages. General Dumbass demands a battalion of soldiers to command so that he can besiege this fort, but this is shot down by the count who says, A. He's not going to provide troops to someone who fought against his realm in the past, and B. If the situation could be so easily solved by marching a battalion off to attack the fort, that he wouldn't have called the party here in the first place. Cue General Dumbass muting his mic while the rest of the party leave and start discussing possible plans. General Dumbass would occasionally chime in to criticize or shoot down people's ideas, but would offer none of his own, except to say bastardized quotes from Sun Tzu's Art of War. When we finally get to the fort, we decide to scout it out at night with our elf ranger who had dark vision. While this is happening, and the rest of the party is hidden, General Dumbass decides to sneak out in the middle of the field before the fort to start a fire, to, quote, provide a distraction and draw them all out. DM must have been feeling merciful, because General Dumbass's silhouette wasn't seen by the bandits manning the walls as he stood next to the blaze he lit. This drew out some of the bandits who did what they could to put out the fire before it became unmanageable, but put the rest of them on high alert, as they were organized and knew that fires don't just start themselves, and that, logically, since they hadn't seen any lightning, that someone must have lit it. This sent General Dumbass into a fury, crying that the DM was targeting him and not letting him play his character, and insisted that all of the bandits should have ran out of the fortress to put out the fire, so that he could sneak around them and single-handedly capture and apparently hold the fort by himself to, quote, show his skill. I guess the DM got tired of his shit because a patrol of bandits set out from the fortress in the general direction of General Dumbass and spotted him in the darkness. He was wearing heavy armor in a stealth mission, and after he tried and failed to challenge the leader of the bandits to a duel through those sent out, decided instead to face off against the half-dozen bandits before him instead of fleeing. We were all on the other side of the fortress when this happened, and so couldn't provide help even if we wanted to. General Dumbass got overwhelmed and killed by the bandits and started blaming the DM and us for ganging up on him and not risking our lives to save a fellow comrade. With that, he left the call and the game, and that was the last we ever heard of General Dumbass, who lasted all of 2 sessions. Man, General Dumbass sounds like he could have been a fun character to play and roleplay as. A comical, overly confident character that fumbles his way through the world, and is just inept in general. Pun totally intended. Unfortunately, this didn't seem to be the player's intention, as it sounds like the player took this character seriously to a degree that put him and the other players in harm's way. And then to blame the DM and the other players for his own stupidity when his character died just shows a lack of self-awareness. I can't say that anything of value was lost when he rage quit the game and never talked to the rest of the group again. Though, what are your thoughts? Let's get to the last story. The Worst Character I Ever Played With, by Reddit user Leon Redblaze. When I was in high school, I was part of a D&D club, and we had some fun playing campaigns after school. When a campaign finished, people would often change up the groups they played with and meet new people, making it a nice way to make friends. But not everyone I played with was super fun or friendly. In one campaign, I joined a group that was actually mostly people I knew from other classes, including one guy I knew who loved playing D&D and would sometimes talk about cool characters he made. Little did I know that his characters were an acquired taste. We started the first session describing a little about our characters so the DM could know how to put us all together. We all started at level 3, and I was a Dragonborn Eldritch Knight fighter. We had a Halfling Thief Rogue, a Human Paladin of the Ancients, a Human Evocation Wizard, and our Shepherd Druid Elf, made by the guy who knew D&D well. He specifically said that his character was one that hated humans and other races because they hurt wildlife and whatnot. To us, it sounded on brand for a druid to prefer animals to humans, so we didn't think much about it. Once the campaign started, the DM threw us right into the thick of it. We started out in the classic tavern scene, but soon could hear screaming outside. We go and see animated skeletons attacking the town, burning buildings, attacking the poor villagers who barricaded themselves in the church, and a big one dragging the mayor off with them. With so much going on, we split into teams. I cast the jump spell on myself and basically long jumped to 1v1 the big guy. Wizard, Paladin, and Rogue run to stop the horde of smaller guys attacking the people, while Druid goes to the jail that is apparently burning down with all the prisoners inside. Now, we have already agreed, in character I might add, that since the Druid knows Create Water, he should cast that to stop the fire. Instead, as he gets there, he asks the DM, quote, "Are there any animals inside the building?" The DM thinks for a moment and says, quote, "A guard dog is still chained up inside." thinking it will encourage the player to put out the fire. Nope. Quote, "I run inside and look for the dog," the Druid says. And the Paladin out of character asks, quote, "Why don't you just put out the fire?" The Druid just shrugs and says, quote, "My character would want the dog to be safe first." DM just rolls with it and makes him roll a Constitution saving throw for the smoke, which he fails and takes poison damage. He unchains the dog, takes it outside, and on his next turn, plays with it. This was when the party had a few more words to say about it, specifically about how he was a chaotic good druid who was allowing people to burn to death when he had the power to put out the fires. It got into a weird debate where he kept trying to say that his character just wasn't motivated enough to cast a level 1 spell, like we discussed, and doesn't even bother to try to help us out either. We eventually give up on convincing this guy to actually do something, other than mess around. And the wizard tries to break away from his battle to use some cold spells on the jail to stop the fire. But by the time he gets there, the DM describes the jail collapsing and killing everyone inside. This puts the party in a pretty bad mood, but the rest of the encounter goes okay. We quickly found out that the druid wasn't kidding when he said he liked animals better than humans. For the rest of the session, any encounters we had, unless the enemy was actively kicking puppies during the fight, the druid would do absolutely nothing to help us, saying that his character was okay with all of us dying to bandits or the undead, because we weren't arbitrarily considered animals. This leads to the end of the session, where we are wrapping things up as we follow the storyline to another town. The thing is, we get both a bad survival and luck roll and encounter something on the way to the city. The DM ended up rolling up a pack of angry wolves. Now, we've only had 2 full encounters so far, and in both of them, we fought things that were not beasts of any kind. Now we are up against wolves, and the druid steps up to try to pacify them with an animal friendship spell, cast on the alpha wolf. The wolf passes his saves and attacks the druid. The rest of us take this as a time to fight moment, but the druid player describes his character being absolutely appalled by our killing of these innocent wolves, who were clearly trying to kill and eat us. He tried to say something noble like, quote, "You guys are the real animals," but we were so fed up with him at this point that we just ignored him. That's when he cast Ice Knife and hit me dead on with it, dealing a surprising amount of damage with it. And my Dragonborn was bronze, so he wasn't resistant to the cold damage. Both in and out of character, I was so mad that I had my guy turn around and rush full speed at this guy on my next turn. I had both my breath weapon and my action surge still up, so I used both. Action surging to get in range with my breath weapon before tearing into him with my axe. It was the most damage I had done the entire game, and this guy's character was literally so low that if I had gotten another swing in, I might have killed him. Instead, he takes a dash action as I take an attack of opportunity at him, but just barely miss, and he runs off into the woods away from my character, with the guy describing his character cursing us out as he left. We finish the encounter and get to the city, and end the session pretty quickly after that. The player looks at the DM and asks, quote, "How do you want to bring back my character?" Since, in these games, we often came up with fun ways to bring back dead or otherwise MIA characters. The DM just looks at him and lays into him. Using the guy's own logic, he basically explains that neither his druid or the party will want to work together ever again. His character would forever hate them for killing his precious forest creatures, while my character would just try to kill him again for betraying the party. Either way, the druid was gone and the guy needed a new character to finish the campaign with. The next time the club got together, the guy had a cleric, who was more helpful, but still kind of one-note at times, with some weirdly specific motivations. Still, it was clear that he learned his lesson about being a jerk to the party, and while he might have found it funny at the time, none of us enjoyed what he did. So it just goes to show you, even people who seem experienced in a game can still be jerks or make awful characters. Look, I can understand wanting to get into and stay in character, but to play in such a way that makes you not work together with your party in a game of cooperation, to the extent that this player did, it's honestly a pretty shitty thing to do when everyone else is trying to have fun and tell a story. Then, to try and PvP another player for fighting wolves, when the wolves are the ones that attacked first, is treading into that guy territory. I can understand the DM's logic when explaining that he can't bring that character back, And I'm glad to hear that that player eventually came back with another character, and used that game as a learning experience. Though, I want to know how you would have handled it. Anyway, have you ever had any experiences with other players that just brought the game down? If so, how would you go about fixing the issues? I would love to hear your thoughts. If you have a story that you would like to be read on the channel, you can always post it in the comments, on the channel's subreddit r/DnD Doge, or even just at me on Twitter. As always, I really do appreciate all of you, and hope all your games are fun and without incident. I will see you guys next time.